course, Kashmir issue, you must have some picture. I hope you know the whole story. What you have to remember is, see, Pakistan keeps saying, why aren't you holding a referendum? You know that point, right? Because we had agreed that after Kashmir joins India, we will have a referendum as to whether the people will want to be with Pakistan and India, and there is a UN resolution. So Pakistan's major point is that this UN resolution India has not implemented. And most people believe the story, including Indians, because none of us has bothered to read the UN resolution. See, the UN resolution says the first step is for Pakistan to withdraw from POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. Number one, it is printed. Pakistan should withdraw from Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. Step number two, India must establish its administrative control over the whole of Jammu and Kashmir. And number three, hold a referendum. So I have met thousands of diplomats from all around the world. They will all ask you, tell me, Mr. Ambassador, why are you not holding a referendum? So what do you say? Can I carry this resolution with me and show it to everybody? They don't understand. So we have to explain there is a first step, there is a second step. So let Pakistan do the first step. Then we'll do a referendum. Because they will never do that. They will never withdraw from POK. They will never allow us to administer Pakistan. Then what is the problem? Why should we implement what? And so 70 years we have held elections in Kashmir. We have had different parties to power. So there is democracy there. We respect their wishes, etc. But a referendum is not possible unless Pakistan withdraws from POK. And that nobody understands. Once a very important Muslim country ambassador called me and gave me some coffee and said, Mr. Ambassador, I have a question to ask you. I said, yes. He said, why don't you just give Kashmir to Pakistan? You're a big country. Kashmir is so small, it's only 4 million people. It's basically Muslim country. Give it. He's saying it as a good friend to save India from all the trouble. And I told him, yes. He was astonished. I said, we'll give. Tomorrow, we'll give Kashmir to Pakistan. But you give me an understanding. You give me an assurance. He said, what? He said, will you save 150 million Muslims in India? Because if 4 million Muslims break away from India, 150 million Muslims will be killed in the streets of Delhi. That's what happened at the time of partition. There was no bitterness. But 2 million people got killed. I said, Kashmir is the symbol of secularism for us. Not that we are fascinated by the land or the beautiful women, etc. Those are other factors. But if Kashmir breaks away from India today, 150 million Muslims will be in danger. I'm not exaggerating. This is what will happen. Because if 4 million people cannot live in India, why should 150 million Muslims live here? And that element is, in Kerala we don't bother about all this. We say, okay, all of them can come and live here, we don't care. But there is very strong feelings against that. Then he said, okay, Mr. Ambassador, don't give Kashmir to Pakistan, he said. And I told this story to Narasimha Rao, and then he said it to Nawaz Sharif. He said, there was this conversation that my ambassador had. So Nawaz Sharif, you know what he said? Mr. Prime Minister, you can never give me Kashmir. I cannot take it. And nor can you keep it. He said, now let us have a conversation. So, I heard this conversation. They were saying it in Urdu, but I couldn't understand that much. That this is not possible. Handing over Kashmir to anybody is not going to be possible. Then what is the solution? If you have a solution, you will get the Nobel Prize. Nobody has a solution. We came very close to a solution during Mr. Vajpayee's days. You may have heard about the meeting in Agra, where President Parvez Musharraf was the president of Pakistan. And we had these discussions, what is called the backdoor discussions between Pakistanis and India secretly for many years. So they came up with a solution that keep the border as it is, the LOC, turn it into an international border, but make that border transparent and open. How about that? So, in other words, on the map we draw a line, but allow Indians and Pakistanis to go across, because the complaint is that the relatives are on the other side, the mosques are on the other side, the temple, the Sikh Gurudwaras are on the other side. So this is the problem that they raise. Because they say, we don't want land, but we want the people to be united. This is their argument. So they try to solve it by saying, agree on the international border and leave the border open so that Indians and Pakistanis can go across each other. And this is almost signed. And there was a young Indian diplomat who had worked with me in Fiji. He used to be in charge of Pakistan at that time. So he was horrified. He said, what will happen if you open that border? Kashmir will disappear. All these Pakistanis terrorists will come and destroy the whole place. Nobody thought about that. And this young man, he tried to persuade Mr. Vajpayee not to sign it. Mr. Vajpayee said, no, we'll manage it and all. You know what he did? He called up Mr. Advani in Delhi and said, please come to Agra immediately. We want to stop something. And he came. Just like Patel in the old days was against China, Nehru was in love with China. So similarly, Advani had a different perspective. And Advani came and stopped it. This, I am not making up the story, it is in Pervez Musharraf's book. They even mentioned the officer's name. Pervez Musharraf says, this is the fellow who destroyed our peace between the two countries. He was my deputy in Fiji. So that was the nearest we got to a solution. But we know now that a solution, it was not a solution. People are all grateful to Vivek Karju for stopping it, because it would have been a big chaos for us. So that's it. From now, how do we take it forward is the solution, is the problem. So there is no solution in sight. But Pakistan is manageable. It's not like China. We can fight a war with them. Strategic strike or whatever, and manage that. Now there is no peace, but no war.
China will stand.
Then China will stand with Pakistanis anytime. Even about this Article 370, China is the one which took us to the United Nations Security Council, openly. So that's it. So if you can find a solution, as I said, you will get a Nobel Prize anytime. Anyway, this is about the neighborhood. And the last item that I would like to...
I would like to ask you a question. We have gone through this idealistic period, pragmatic period, globalist and strategic autonomy and assertive, multipolar. What do you think the trajectory of Indian foreign policy will be in the next few years? Whether Modi continues or even...
If Mr. Modi continues or even otherwise, now our objective is to be a major global power as a center, because several centers are developing. Eventually it's supposed to be 6 centers, 3 already developed. The other 3 are European Union, very powerful, Japan and India. This is the expectation. But it's a long way away. So that is our strategy. Our strategy is to have a strong base with countries like Australia, Japan, France, Germany, etc. That is our strategy. Whether we'll succeed or not, we don't know. So what we are doing is, of course, we are strengthening our relationship with the US, China and Russia, at the same time remaining independent of them. That is our policy. Okay, the last one is the UN. That is my specialization. 20 years I spent at the United Nations. So UN and other international organizations, that is your agenda. So basic things you should know. I'm sure you know the basic things, what is General Assembly, what is Security Council, what is Economic and Social Council. All that you can look up. And that you should know, the structure of the United Nations. And then the question will always be asked whether it has been a success or a failure. Right? Does it have a future? The second question. Third is, can India ever become a permanent member of the Security Council? So these are the 3 questions you have to know. What is the structure? Security Council is the most powerful because it deals with peace and security. General Assembly is the whole body of the members of the UN. Decisions of General Assembly are not binding, but Security Council decisions are binding on the members. Then Economic and Social Council deals with economic and social issues. Then there is these are divided as committees. First committee is disarmament and security. Second committee is economic issues. Third committee is social issues. Fourth committee is political issues. Fifth committee is administrative issues. And sixth committee is the legal committee. And the joke is there is a seventh committee. You know what it is? The delegates bar in the United Nations. That is where all the decisions are taken. You argue all in the hall, but finally the ambassadors will go and have a drink and problems are solved like that. So that's what's called the seventh committee. So ambassadors are in the seventh committee. We don't hold meetings. We simply settle it over a drink or a little bit of coffee. That don't write in the examination. There is no such thing. So this is how it works. And the Security Council deals with international security and works with the first committee. Then there is a sixth agency, is the Secretary General. Though he is, normally speaking, he is a CEO of the UN. But that is only one aspect of his personality. He is also considered the conscience of mankind. He is not simply a CEO. He is a CEO, he manages the whole administration. But at the same time, he is a player in international relations. How? Any trouble anywhere happening, he has the authority to intervene if he thinks it is appropriate. And he has to bring it to the attention of the Security Council before the war breaks out. So he keeps an eye, the entire structure, keeps an eye on whatever is happening in the whole world, and he has people everywhere. And they report to him that there is trouble brewing between, say, Ethiopia and Eritrea. Then immediately he starts what is called a peacemaking or a preventive diplomacy it is called. He talks to both of them unofficially and tries to find out this problem, and if he thinks it cannot be solved, if he can solve it, nothing like it. Otherwise he reports to the Security Council. Okay? So that is the process. So first is preventive diplomacy, which the Secretary General does before the war breaks out. If the war breaks out, you go to the Security Council and the Security Council discusses the issue. But before they do that, they ask for a ceasefire. That is the first thing. People should not be killed. So the first immediate action by the Security Council to order a ceasefire. Okay? And once a ceasefire is there, they put a UN peacekeeping force between the two. Not when they are fighting, because if you send a UN force there, because they have no arms, they have only revolvers, so they'll all be killed. So ceasefire comes into effect, then the war should not flare up. So they send a peacekeeping force, and the Secretary General picks up countries, soldiers, they put them together and send them there. And then they do what is called peacemaking. So first is ceasefire, a preventive diplomacy, then ceasefire, then peacekeeping, that is so that it doesn't flare up, then peacemaking. They sit down and discuss for years or months or whatever. Meanwhile, the peacekeeping force remains there. So the UN peacekeeping force still is between India and Pakistan. They are there. We don't recognize them, but some 32 people are hanging around for these years. For 70 years they have been there. They're having a good time, good salary, everything. So beautiful for them, but nothing happens. Anyway, and then suppose they are able to break in an agreement, then that will be called peacemaking, and then peace building. That means all these wars must have caused so much of damage. Then you have to hold elections, bring in a government which is acceptable to the people. So these are the various stages of Security Council action to prevent wars, or if wars come, to prevent it. And then there is one other capacity that the UN has, which is rarely exercised, is peace enforcement. Like only twice it has been used. One in Korea, the UN went and fought a war with both North Koreans and South Koreans and put a no man's land in between. That's why two Koreas are now surviving. India and Pakistan, there is no scope for that. But when Iraq occupied Kuwait, a full-fledged army, full-fledged soldiers went and saved Kuwait its sovereignty was restored. And that is one action which was very successful. Kuwait was grabbed by Iraq, but that was liberated by a war, and that's a peace enforcement. So these are the various stages. So India is still in the peacekeeping stage. We have not gone any further than that. But many other issues, Cyprus, there have been solutions, Cambodia, Somalia, there are many areas where UN has succeeded in avoiding war. But still, there have been 800 wars since the United Nations was established. Since 1945, because the UN Charter says this organization is to save the succeeding generations from the scourge of war. The danger of war should not come to the succeeding generations. That is the objective of the UN. But there have been 800 wars, so how do you explain that? So the UN is a failure. But many people say, but we did not have a third world war, right? These smaller wars have taken place, but because of the UN, there was no third war. Nobody knows. Is it because of the UN or in spite of it? So when people ask you whether the UN is effective, so you should say if it was prevention of war, it is not effective. But at the same time, it has done a lot of good. UN. It has very many activities. Now, like for example, now this virus, the UN will take the lead because it's an international problem. Like HIV/AIDS, UN is the one which intervened effectively, developed a vaccine and solution. So UN will now take over this whole crisis. And such a thing nobody else can do. So WHO is there, FAO is there, UNDP is there, IAEA is there, so many specialized agencies. So the UN, apart from preventing war, has also made a big contribution to development of the world. They collect money, UN refugees, human rights, all this. So many advances have been made to save mankind, as it were. So when the UN celebrated its 70th anniversary, somebody asked the Secretary General, what is the biggest achievement of the UN? So everybody thought he will say we prevented a third world war. But he didn't say that. Do you know what he said? We have immunized the world's children against infectious diseases. He said that is the achievement of the UN. Because if they had not done that, millions of children would have died in different parts of the world. But the UN succeeded in vaccinating every child in the world against infectious diseases. There are other diseases, but many of the frightening diseases like the plague and the typhoid and so many other diseases, now even polio is prevented to a certain extent. They still exist. So this is what Ban Ki-moon said. The biggest achievement was that so prevention of war is okay. But more children would have died out of infectious diseases than in a war. And so he claims that was and therefore UN has a continuing role in peacemaking, peace building, etc. But if nothing else, in social and economic development of the world, in human rights, etc. So the UN will continue. There is no alternative to the UN, even if it has failed in several respects, but it has succeeded. That should be your view. And you have to support it. So for that you need to read up